decide, if a
Sorry.
club decides, that's okay, that they're going to make membership a focus. Now, when I say the word membership, what that means to me is a strategic intention towards creating an environment where our members and prospective members want to be, period. Really. So sometimes when we say the word Rotary membership, people's minds go to grow, 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 right? Because we talk about that sometimes in terms of growing Rotary. And my belief is that growth is just a byproduct of creating a great place where people want to be. And so if we're intentional about doing that, growth is going to happen. That's just the way it is. And so my message, my belief is, let's just focus on creating a great place where people want to be and being intentional about that. So I talk about intentional leadership, which is the matrix where essentially a plan to create a great environment where people want to be, and a system or a bias towards action intersect, right? It's both of those things working in tandem. You can't just have one. And so what I was kind of chatting about with some of your district leaders prior to them coming is, certainly we want to be innovative. We want to talk about new innovative ideas. We want to talk about what consumers are looking for in today's market, right? Because they are a consumer of the thing that we're doing in the world. And it really just comes down for me more to intentionality, right? It's just that focus on it. And what I've observed is that the presidents in the clubs and the leaders that decide we're going to make this important, their clubs just seem to grow because they decided that this was going to be a priority, and they generally created a plan around it, and they did good things in their club. And so creating this place where people want to be. So Lane asked me to talk specifically about attraction and engagement techniques. So I'm going to share a few ideas around that. And I do want to have just an open conversation. I think we have a small enough group that we can certainly just have some open dialogue and keep this a little bit casual, right? It's just us. We're all Rotarians here trying to do our best. So I'm gonna share my screen here in just a moment.
Jennifer, I'll play this song when you have 5 minutes and a minute.
Okay, perfect.
Awesome, thanks.
All right, so you should see my screen. Yes. Yep. Okay. All right, so like I said, Lane's asked me to talk a little bit about attracting and then a little bit about engagement. Okay. So I am going to share some ideas around here, but feel free to raise your hand, ask a question. Because of the size of our group, I think that's appropriate. We can just be a little bit more casual in our presentation. So I'm going to start off with attracting. So when I think about attracting, I think about it from two aspects. There's one aspect where I'm talking about the active recruitment of people. And then there is one aspect where when I think about attraction in terms of creating a vibrant club. I'm going to focus predominantly on recruiting, because when I get to the engagement part of our presentation today, that's really what creates a vibrant club, right? So I'm going to talk a little bit about intentional attraction. So sometimes clubs will, they'll say, well, we don't want to grow, or we kind of like the size we are, but there is such a thing as kind of a normal and an acceptable level of attrition. People, we wish and hope that they're going to come and stay in Rotary for forever, but we know that there is an acceptable level of attrition. There, just a percentage of people that will leave the club on an annual basis. And so around 10% is kind of, that's actually a pretty good performing club. If you're losing about 10% of your membership, that's an actual, what's considered a good level of retention, right? That we're retaining at least 90% of our members. So the reality that we have to go out and find new members is just, it is the norm. And so if we're going to do that, let's think about who and how and what we're going to say to them. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this recruiting. concept and recognizing that we always have to be doing this. And so let's be intentional about it and be seeking out the people that we think are the right fit for our club and right fit for Rotary. So I like to think about our club when we think about how do we tell people who we are. I think it's fun to talk about this through the lens of Rotary's core values. And those core values are the 5 statements that you see here on your screen: fellowship, integrity, diversity, service, and leadership. Those are Rotary's 5 core values. And what really led me to think about it through this lens really was listening to Holger Knack, he's a former RI president, so he's a past Rotary International president. He was from Germany, and he was talking to a group of Rotarians, and he said, in Germany, we really lean more into fellowship and integrity, but in the US, you lean more into service. And I thought it was interesting when he made that statement. And then I thought about it from my own perspective and what I lean into in Rotary. And I thought, for me, I love service, but I would say probably my top 2 are leadership and fellowship. If I were to look at these core values and say kind of the part that fills me up in Rotary, is serving other Rotarians in the service of leadership, and the Rotarians that I've met all over the world, awesome people like Lane, who I would have never crossed paths with had it not been for Rotary, right? And so for me, those are probably my top 2. It doesn't mean that all of these things aren't important, but those are the things that attract me the most, right? And so I thought, wouldn't it be interesting for clubs to think about who they are through the lens of Rotary's core values? And so I just put together kind of this example of ways that we can create talking points around who we are as a club. And I think what's further important here is the decision as a club to go in deep to certain areas. I think sometimes we can fall into the trap of trying to be something to everybody versus everything to some. So whether I'm a Rotary club or I'm a business, right, wanting to grow my business, it's a lot easier to reach and speak to your target demographic when you get a little bit more clear on who we are and what we're offering into the world, and you niche down. Your message becomes a lot more succinct. The people that are attracted to that are going to connect with you. They see you and they go, yeah, that's me. That's what I want. And so this is a concept based around a timeless principle, which is a unique selling proposition, might be a term that you've probably heard before, but these are just some ideas. So let's play around with some hypothetical scenarios. So scenario 1 is Club A here, who decides they're going to lean into fellowship, diversity, and service. So for example, that might look like this club focuses a little bit on business networking and social events. Maybe they're really purposeful and intentional about seeking a diverse population and creating an inclusive environment. Maybe in their club, service exists more of an annual fundraiser where they raise money and then they support local organizations. Okay, so it's more, their service is more from the fundraising and the check writing perspective, and that's okay, right? We get to do Rotary in the way that we deem that is right for that club. Maybe Club B, as an example, they lean into service and fellowship and leadership. So maybe for them, maybe, yeah, they write some checks, but maybe this club is a lot more hands-on. Maybe they're doing a hands-on service project every single month. Maybe they're really clear on one specific avenue of service. So in this example of this club, maybe they're focused on food security, right? They're out there. This is a picture of a club that helps harvest some of the waste from crops, and they use it. They have a food bank. So this is an actual illustration of that, of a club that's really focused on food security, or maybe they're focused on the environment, whatever it is. But maybe their fellowship is baked into that service, right? That's how they experience fellowship, is they maybe create an after service project event where they can hang out. And maybe in their leadership model, they really focus on the rotational assignment of various projects, letting different Rotarians step into leadership opportunities through the management of a particular project. So again, this is just an example of how we can identify as a club and then be able to talk about that to the community. And then Club C is an example of leaning into leadership, integrity, and service. So maybe for them, it looks like on their leadership side, they're utilizing some of the Toastmaster series that are in Rotary's Online Learning Center. Maybe they're implementing programs where they really nurture young professionals and let them learn how to speak, and they create mentorship opportunities. Maybe on the leaning into the integrity, maybe they have like a 4-way test spotlight series where they maybe scholarship some students through a spotlight, through an integrity and ethics type of an essay. And maybe for this particular club service, they have a fundraiser that provides money for global grants. So these are just ideas and ways to think about how do we lean into who we are. It's going to help us speak around that to prospective members. So next, I want to talk about some attraction activities. So it's kind of maybe thinking through this in this phase of events. So phase 1 is, who are we and how are we going to explain this to people? What is going to be our unique selling proposition where we can say, this is why us, 1, 2, 3, really clearly and succinctly. And so now once we know what that is, we can maybe do some activities. So here's some ideas around some of those activities. You Belong Here is a campaign that has begun to kind of bubble up. We're seeing more people that are talking about you belong here, and this is why. Maybe you can go in and look at members that left your club in the last 5 years and see if they want to come back, invite them back. Are you guys a Club Runner district? Yeah, so you can go into Club Runner, you can pull a report, you can say, I want to look at members that left in the last 5 years. So you're doing a search by a termination date. Go find those individuals and maybe see if they're ready to come back to your club. Maybe you can do an attraction activity where you're placing a booth where your target demographic will be. So an example of this is we had a booth at a women's event because we were very purposefully trying to attract women. We made sure all of our literature had images of women, that we were talking about projects that we thought would appeal to our target demographic, right? So getting clear on who am I trying to reach, where are they, and how can we present well in that particular marketing event. And then, of course, public image, branding, and storytelling is an important attraction activity, which is an entire seminar in and of itself. But just making sure that we're active and presenting the right image and the photos and the messaging that we want to attract that right person. So then the other aspect I wanted to talk about a little bit was club structure. So thinking about, are there ways that we can change some of our structure and membership options to be more attractive? And so some of those options might be corporate membership, family membership, young professional options, flexibility in the way that we do this, and maybe some mentor type programs. So I'm going to share some more tools with you around different ideas around that. But sometimes what clubs will do is maybe make a satellite option where we have perhaps a reduced fee, reduced time commitments, things like that, where we can reduce the barriers to entry. When we survey potential members, they say that the biggest barriers for entry are time and money. Now, I'm also a believer that if it's important enough, we will find the time and we will find the money for the things that we value. But I also recognize that these are people that don't know Rotary yet, right? So we want to bring them in and give them a chance to be bitten by that Rotary bug. So we may need to be a little creative and innovative around that. So I've seen options where clubs on a corporate membership, they'll say, one person's going to be on our Rotary roster. We're going to charge you our normal fee or maybe a slightly higher fee, and they'll let other people from their company come to meetings when they want to, right? But they only have one of the members on their roster. Sometimes they'll say, we're going to charge you a little higher, but yet slightly reduced multiple of our normal membership option, and we're going to put 2 or 3 people on that roster. So there's lots of ways that you can get creative here. The only boundaries that exist are the ones that you create right around this. So you can decide what that structure looks like. And the same goes with family options. The same goes with young professional options. So there's really no barriers to those structures in terms of dues and time outside of the ones that we create at the club level. So let's open up our mind to what's possible and create new avenues and new ways for people to connect with us. So these are just some club structure ideas on ways to reduce those barriers. These are some of the many tools. You know, RI is not lacking for tools. There are so many that sometimes you can even get a little bit lost in it. But I want to at least shine a light on these things that are out there so you can, with your board, maybe look through this and decide what is the right structure for us. What are some other options we could be considering? So just some of the tools that I wanted to highlight here that are attraction specific is this first one you see here, creating a positive experience for prospective members. So I like to think, you know, from interested to inducted to engaged, what is that life cycle look like for that potential member? And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we go into engagement. But particularly with prospective members, how do we make sure that we're keeping them engaged and we're following up with them well? In fact, it was funny, I just talked to a gentleman the other day who had been invited to a membership drive with a different service club organization that starts with the letter K. And he went and attended the meeting, and he didn't feel like it was quite right for him. But this is a person who's kind of in that customer service world. And he said, you know, I thought it was a little odd that nobody followed up with me. I went to this membership drive meeting and I left, and I kind of waited for somebody to reach out to me, and nobody did. So it's just the little things, right? The little details. So this creating a positive experience for prospective members is going to talk about a lot of aspects in terms of what that total experience looks like. But one little detail is great following up. There's a guide to satellite clubs, a guide to corporate membership. I gave you a couple of ideas on that. In the lower left quadrant, this engaging younger professionals. If you just simply Googled Rotary engaging younger professionals, you're going to land on an entire web page that is just rich with different ideas and resources. And then in the lower right corner of the screen is the Rotary Brand Center. So lots of resources there to help you update your look and appearance to make sure that it is in keeping with where we're at right now with branding. Okay, so I would like to open this up for questions specifically, and our comments and our best practices, great ideas, things that you've done around attraction that you think have worked well. So let's have a little bit of an open conversation. What questions do you have, or what things have you done that you think are great ideas that other people would like to borrow, as Neilani says?
You guys can raise your hand too.
Yeah, raise your hand or just unmute and speak up. Or where are areas where maybe you're feeling stuck that you feel like you could use some help? What do you think, Lane? What have you heard?
You know, I think where people feel stuck is they feel like there's a lot of members that are, currently leaving. How do we retain the members we currently have and keep them engaged and keep them excited? And how do we, stop the revolving door? I think, those are the things I keep hearing a lot.
Okay, so that's more on the retention side, right? Versus the attraction. Okay,
Yes,
so
that's right.
okay,
right.
so I'll get on my my favorite soapbox, which is called the onboarding soapbox. Okay.
Yes.
All right, so so that is kind of after the attraction phase. So we've done the work to bring them to a meeting and or an event, whatever that is, and now we want to take them from interested to engaged. Okay, so I like to talk about onboarding, which I don't have those slides in this presentation. It's kind of its own standalone, but I'm going to talk around it a little bit. And so the purpose of onboarding versus the word new member orientation, it's different, right? Onboarding is a process that takes you all the way from interested to engaged. And the reason why I think this is such an important topic is, to Lane's point, it doesn't matter what district's termination report I pull up. So as a zone person, I support 30 different districts in our 2 paired zones, okay? I could pull up any one of those districts' termination profiles. And if I were to look at the members that we lost over the last 5 years, about half of them have been in Rotary for less than 3 years. Of those members, about half of them have been in Rotary for less than a year, meaning they came in and they left in the first year. Okay, so when I think about onboarding, I put it into 3 phases. The first phase is value alignment interview. So before they're even a member, I like to have a value alignment interview with them where I'm asking them questions around what brings you to Rotary? What are you interested in getting involved in? Why is that? What else? What else? What else? So really trying to dig into the reason that they're reaching out to us. Maybe they're reaching out to us because they want to get more connected into their community for business, right? Sometimes that's the real reason. Maybe they want to just meet some new people. Maybe they want to get involved in giving back to the community and service. So whatever that answer is, we need to understand that, because that's going to help us create the next step, right? The right experience for them. So we want to really understand what's driving their decision. And we also want to have a managing expectations conversation up front. This is the time investment. This is the dollar investment. What questions do you have? What concerns do you have around that? Really trying to make sure we get ahead of that so nobody is surprised and they're really ready to come in and join us. So having a great value alignment interview at the beginning, I think, is super critical. So I'm going to share an example of one I did with a gal that just joined my club about 8 months ago. So we started talking, and she was driven by service and in particular the environment. So my own club, really the breadth of our environmental focus is we planted trees, right? And that was kind of it. And so I said to her, sensing that was not going to be enough for her, helped her get connected to our district's environmental stewardship committee. I gave her some information on the Environmental Stewardship Rotary Action Group, which is the international group that is focused within Rotary on the environment. And then I asked her if she'd do a presentation to the club and on her environmental focus. And so all of those things happened. She's connected in with all of those. And then she did a presentation. And now today, in 8 short months, we had a change in our service chair leadership, and she stepped into that position. Carolyn, let me see what question you have before I continue on.
Aloha, and thank you for spending your day with us.
Yes, absolutely.
My question is, we have longtime members who never show.
Right.
They pay their dues, they're friendly, they're courteous, and they don't show up for meetings, they don't show up for community service. I have been told that they want community service, and I have asked what kind. I will find it. And then they don't show up, and then it's 4 or 5 of us, and I hate to use the word, but senior members who show up and do the community service, and it'd be lovely to have some 30 and 40-year-olds to lug stuff around. But going through, and it might not be a bad thing to go through an onboard process if they will read the emails. But that to remind them why they joined and what Rotary is about. Uh, but it's frustrating to plan something and then it's the same 3 people. Now, we're good people and we have a good time, but the mean age is around 70 and we have younger members that need to start taking charge of this. I'm done.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack in all the things that you talked about right there, right? I mean, there's so many different nuances and aspects. So I'm going to circle back to that for just a moment. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about this concept that I'm talking about with this new member and getting them engaged, the revolving door problem. And then I'm going to come back to your question. And there's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of things in there. So back to this revolving door challenge. So I think step 1 is let's try to cut it off at the pass at the beginning. Okay. So I talked about a value alignment interview, have a really great induction ceremony. And then in that critical first year, that's when I think that we have the most risk, right, with these new, because I think if we can engage them in year 1 and get them plugged in to the right place, then it's going to change some of these things that you're even talking about, Carolyn. So I call it the stickiness factor. And there's two components to that. Number 1 is they have to find their role in the club and be of value to the club and be committed to it, right? Because we plugged them into a place that is meaningful for them. They enjoy it and they feel a value versus giving them the junky job that nobody wants, right? And so, and I realize that we have jobs that maybe aren't all of the fun and we have to figure out where those, how to manage those. But the idea is plugging them into a place that's meaningful for them. And then the second part that creates stickiness is they have to find a friend. And so if the only place they have for fellowship is the 5 minutes before you ring the bell and start the meeting, it's pretty limited, right? So we have to make sure we find opportunities where people can friendships can evolve and those connections are made. And that's the stickiness magic. They've got to plug into their spot and feel a sense of responsibility at some level that is manageable for them. Like we can't overburden them and burn them out, right? We gotta let them walk into this in a way that works. And then we have to help them find a friend. And so when I talk about onboarding, and so one of the things you mentioned was orientation emails. That's just a part of it. The onboarding really needs to have a human element to it, right? There needs to be a mentor that is checking in with them, that's meeting with them, that's asking them about, what are the things that you want to do in this club? Here are the jobs that we have available. Which one of these is suitable for you? Hey, texting them, are you coming to this fun event on Friday? So there has to, I think the right onboarding experience is a year worth of planned events and activities where we're sending them information in a systemized and organized manner. And we have a human that is connecting with them, making sure that they're getting plugged in. And so those mentors have also a process that they follow, versus what usually happens in club where we induct them and, we hand them a checklist and we give them their pin and we say, okay, go do this checklist. And then you're engaged, right? And so being a little bit more systematic and a little bit more intentional and thoughtful around what does that first year's worth of processes look like? And then can we have a 1-year anniversary celebration for them? Okay, that in my mind is onboarding versus orientation. Orientation is a one-time event where we sit down and say, in 1905, Paul Harris created the Rotary Club, and we educate them versus onboarding and connecting them in the club. Okay, so let's go back to your question, Carolyn. You asked, a lot of things in there. So I'm hoping that, step 1 is we make their first year as impactful as possible. I think that's going to create some of the sticky and the engagement factor. Okay, so now you've got people that just aren't showing up and they're paying their dues. So, my belief is, and it sounds like you've done this, right, where you've called them in or you've met with them and you've asked them what they're looking for and you've created those opportunities. I think part 2 of them is we need to ask for their help. So I've recently done this too with a bunch of new members in my club. And, COVID was tough on my club, like it was a lot of clubs. And so I have these new members and I met with them and I asked them, What do you want in this club? What's working for you? What would you do differently? Got their feedback, and then, went and took that feedback and turned it into action. And then I said to them, I need your help. And this is what we're going to do, but will you come and help me? And what in my, professional life and in my service life, I feel like most people want to be a hero, right? They want to step up and be able to help out when they can. And so, I think I asked them, I want to create this, but I need your help. Are you willing to help me? And pause and wait for their answer, right? But, and then if they don't show up, Carolyn, if you've done all the things, you've asked them, you've created then you got to move forward and go find the people that are going to, right? We can't spend a ton of time and energy if people aren't ready to come and meet us halfway. So, let them stay on your roster if they're paying their dues, and, they're helping fund the club, and that's their contribution. And then we got to go find people that are willing to do some of the other things. You talked about, we need people that are this age. So I get asked all the time, how do we attract young professionals? So this comes back down to, what are young professionals looking for? So if I think back, right, when you're building your career, they're looking for opportunities to connect. They're looking for opportunities to learn. They're looking for opportunities to practice leadership, right? Those are probably the things that they want. They might have some limited time based upon, if they're young family obligations, things like that. So we have to create the right atmosphere for them. But I also believe, this is the world according to Jennifer DeRoyne, that it's difficult to skip a generation. If the average age of our club is 70, you probably want to go recruiting 40 and 50-year-olds, maybe, but not skip a whole generation. I think that's a pretty big jump to make. So go out and recruit that group, and then maybe let that group then begin recruiting that next generation. But skipping an entire generation, I think is a little bit more difficult of a lift. So that's my 2 cents on recruiting young professionals. Okay, I'll be quiet now. What other information what other questions do people have?
Real quick, just to jump on what Jennifer said, one of the things that one of the clubs did is had intention. That word intention comes up a lot, and intention service. And there was a member that wasn't coming. And like Caroline said, we have members that, they haven't shown up. And what we did is there was a potential member, and, they wanted to join the club. So they paired that one member that wasn't coming to service projects with this other member, and talked to them before the project and said, hey, guess what, Jennifer, there's this potential member and they're in the same industry as you. And, they want to get to know more about the industry. Do you mind pairing up together so you guys can get to know each other? And then they were like, yeah. So that member actually did come to that service project and started coming to more service projects after that. But anyhow.
And essentially what you said there, Lane, is it's a real personal outreach. It's intentionality and thinking about what might they want, what are they looking for, and trying those things, and then not beating yourself up too much, and then going and finding people that will. Okay, so we have about 20 minutes left, and Lane also asked that I talk about engaging members, which is a ginormous bucket of stuff, right? And in my experience, it's not one thing, it's the 20 little things that we're doing that make up the big sum. But versus give you my opinion, what I thought I would do is share with you a survey. So in our zones, we did a survey and talked to 85 clubs that have grown more than 10 members in the last 5 years, okay? And we were looking for the recurring patterns. And so this kind of goes back to the silver bullet idea that we're all looking for. And what I'm going to share with you is that what I often say is there isn't a silver bullet. It takes intentionality. It just takes the work of creating a place where people want to be. But I want to share with you what we did find in terms of this survey information. Okay, so I mentioned 85 clubs that grew from 2017 to 2020 of at least more than 10 members, okay? So this is during the COVID time period, right? And this is all data information versus, you know, my personal opinion, right? And so I think when people look at this, they think, oh, well, these must be big clubs if they grew by 10 members. And so one of the data points we find that club size didn't matter in this, that leadership did. It's that intentional leadership. So this is a breakdown on the size of those clubs. 43% of the clubs that we interviewed had 26 to 50 members. 18% of them had over 50. So they were actually the smallest group. And then 39% of them were at 7 to 25 members. So some of these clubs started out at 7 members and they grew by 10. So that's just simply intentionality. So the 5 areas we found that they had common is they had active intentional membership engagement, meaning they created plans around how are we going to engage our members. They had dynamic service. They had effective governance, meaning they created a plan and they worked that plan. They had good public image and they were focused on DEI. Those were the 5 common things that we saw in all of these high growing clubs, okay? So when we talk about active and intentional engagement, there were 4 things that we found that were common and consistent in these clubs. They had great meetings with an opportunity for strong friendships. Their meetings were consistent and flexible. They did a good job of engaging new members, which you heard me on my soapbox there for a moment. And they said, thank you. Real basics, right? So nothing alarming here, just the tried and true things that we know need to be existent to create active and intentional engagement. Some interesting points from that is that 76% of those 85 clubs that we interviewed, they still meet in person every week. 65% of them, though, use hybrid and virtual options, which surprised me because I think a lot of us really learned how to flex, obviously, during COVID. But I think kind of once we got back in, we were able to meet again. And I thought a lot of clubs dropped their hybrid options, but this showed us that these high growth clubs, 65% of them still have that option. And almost a third of them had a satellite option, which I thought was really interesting. So I talked to you about that, reducing those barrier and time cost, I should say those time and money cost barriers. So creating the satellite club was a great way maybe to do that. And there's this new term out there that's called an impact satellite club or just an impact club, which essentially it is a satellite club that is 100% focused on service, okay? So if you hear that terminology and you want to learn more, please reach out to Lane and we can talk a little bit more about impact clubs. But I thought that was interesting. A third of them had that option. 70% of these clubs had a defined new member orientation process. So again, the word orientation to me, it kind of means a singular event. So hopefully we're doing all of these things at creating an onboarding experience, an experience that happens over time where we are orienting them with education. We're discovering their needs. We're helping them get connected, getting plugged in, finding their role. We're helping them find a mentor that's going to help them navigate their way on their first year journey. And we're making sure that they're finding a friend. And so if we have kind of a systemized process for that, that's going to help us be able to check the box on those things. One of the things that we found is they did a really good job of informing and thanking their members. So they're taking time on a regular basis to talk about how they're doing with their club's action plan. They're talking about progress, they're asking for help, and they're doing a good job of recognizing and thanking their members. Okay. I mentioned the second item in the 5 common denominators. They had dynamic and meaningful service. So we found in all of these clubs, they had signature projects and fundraisers. They did a good job of including the community. So it wasn't just them. And they had a lot of ongoing and active service, so an opportunity for people to really get their hands into that. So really high percentages here in terms of repeating fundraisers and repeating service projects. So kind of those signature projects that they're known for, they had a really high percentage of that. As I mentioned before, they did a good job of inviting other people in. So inviting the community in, it wasn't just them. This is an opportunity to showcase your club, to invite and create some brand awareness. And so they did 87% of them made sure that the public was invited. And then they also did very intentional new member attraction events. So 67% of them, okay? And they had ongoing service. So 78% of them had 4 or more service projects a year, but look at that, 40% of them had 10 service projects a year. So very active. They had really strong public image, so they, a lot of them are on Facebook. Some of them are on Instagram. They're using Rotary's Brand Center, doing a good job of that, making sure that they have current and new information. They're also using, half of them were using the local news. So they were doing a good job of using local news and getting press out there. Let's see here. So I kind of talked a little bit about this, inviting community. And then in terms of DEI, really, this wasn't just a wish. These clubs were very intentional about creating a place and where everybody feels welcome, but that they were recruiting very specific groups, making sure that their club was a representation of their community. So DEI is it's a big topic, but these are some tools that you can use to figure out, how we can create a little bit more diversity in our clubs. So as I mentioned, I don't think there's anything in this that is surprising. These are all things that we know. These are things that we talk about on a regular basis. It just, again, comes back down to that intentional leadership in our decision to create a plan where we're always attracting new members, onboarding them well, and then engaging them with great meetings, onboarding. I talked about that. Great service, good public image, DEI. So all of the things that I think we talk about on a regular basis. So let me pause and see what questions you have around engagement or places where you feel stuck. What do you hear, Lane? What are some of the things you hear? Oh, hi, Anne or Anka.
It's Anka. Hi, thank you so much. I really like your idea about intentional onboarding. That makes so much sense. But I wanted to share a little bit about my story. I joined in 2019, but what I like so much is that it's not only my club, but there is an entire district. There are so many other clubs. So sometimes, I do something with the Eco Club because they have great projects, or another club. And the idea of collaborating, but in regards to our own club, so how do we stick with our own club while there is so much else going on that is quite interesting and fascinating in our district and even beyond?
Yeah, well, I would say, Anka, and to make sure I understand the intention of your question, but I would say we want to encourage people to explore the wide world of Rotary. And when I am talking about my onboarding presentation, one of the things I do talk about is making sure we are opening their eyes to all that is possible, right? I think if we're doing a good job as Rotarians, we are helping members understand that they've joined an international organization, and there's so many places where they can get plugged in. And so one of the things that I suggest is kind of a systemized, email drip campaign. And in one of those, we talk about make sure that you have liked the social media of not just our club, but also the district, so that you can be exposed to all of these other events, as well as Rotary International, some of the Rotary action groups that I talked about. So just making sure they know that there is this wide world of Rotary out there. So let me stop though and make sure I understood your question. What do you just want to make sure that people know that that we should be doing that, or do you have a?
No, that's just another level of attracting people, to share. But also, I know from myself too, if which club to pick, because there are so many out there. But which one will be my home club?
Yeah.
Or do I switch? Do I always stick with one? Do I switch?
Oh,
And
okay.
I know people have questions like this too, because they're not always picking a club that is where they live.
Yeah, yeah. No, I would encourage anybody you to find the right club that is the right fit for you. And then to also be able to know that you're free to be engaged with service projects and activities that other clubs are hosting, right? We're a membership organization, and the idea is that we have opened up our, this world to Rotarians globally, and we want to be able to get involved in any area. So if your question is, should I consider a different club? My answer would be that you should be in a club that is the right fit for you, that's engaging to you. Lane, what would you say to that?
Thank you.
Yeah, I totally agree. You got to find that right fit for the right, for that right person, and helping with the membership leads. I think that's one of the things I really learned is listening to that person, even though they live on one side of our island. They are actually, when you have that conversation, you start finding out actually they want to meet in town, and like, oh, wow. So you start figuring out like, what do they really want? And then once you put them in there and get the right people in that club to engage them and keep them, keep asking them, hey, we got a Pauhana, hey, we got a happy hour, hey, we got a service project, keep inviting them. And eventually it might take longer for some folks because they might be busy with family and work, but eventually they will come because they felt like they were needed, they were wanted, and they wanted to find that family that would accept them. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. What other questions do we have out there, or something that you would like to discuss around membership engagement? What things do you hear, Lane, that you think that are places where people want more innovative ideas?
I think some of the things that I keep hearing is, gosh, like Caroline was mentioning, we have, all these projects, and I make these projects, and, folks aren't coming around, and how do we get them re-engaged again, and not just engaged, but energized again, because then, you're trying to energize your membership base. And I think I hear that quite often, Jennifer.
Yeah. So one thing that I'm doing in my own club, this is my own attempt at addressing this challenge, is I mentioned I met with a bunch of new members and asked them what they wanted. And they said, well, we'd like this, and we'd like that, and we'd like this, and we'd like that. And I said, that would be awesome. And I know that all takes leadership structure, that takes people that are willing to, right, put their hand in and help. And so the challenge is, right, I'm going to put them in the young professional category. Okay. And so let's say in this particular case, 30 to, mid 40s, maybe, right? And so they're working a lot. Some of them are, raising families. And there is a reality. We live in a time-deprived society, right? We're all very busy. So we have to meet people where they're at. And so in my case, what I suggested is that we change our second meeting of the month. We meet every week on Tuesdays. So the second Tuesday was going to be club committee meeting week. And this goes back to me going back to them and saying, I love your ideas. These are amazing. We're going to work on implementing these. I really need your help. Of these ideas, which one would you like to lead? Which one would you like to take and run with and create? And so I'm plugging them into I'm going to call these kind of micro leadership roles, right? They're not a huge, giant responsibility, but there's something that they said was important to them and they can take and own. and they can do it during the normal club meeting time versus them having to go and spend an additional meeting and all this other time. And then the other flip side of that was, so now we're expanding our committee structure and letting people kind of take on these micro leadership roles, micro being, right, this not this huge, enormous time lift. And that everybody else that is just normally coming to the meetings, maybe not doing a whole lot, they are now all on a committee, right? So they got to then pick, oh, I want to go and be in this committee or that committee. And, and I gave each of the committee leaders a little action item sheet. And so when they're sitting around and they're planning this little event, and, Phil says, hey, I think I could help contact XYZ venue and see if we can make an arrangement. Great. The committee leader writes down, Phil's committed to doing this by this date. And so they're kind of, it's a way to keep it organized and on track. But, and so this is something that's a little bit new, but that was my answer to how do I get the people that aren't coming to come? And how do we implement some of the things that they want without it being an enormous burden on us, the small few? Does that make sense? So that's what I'm trying in my own club. Does that help? Okay, what other ideas do people have in that regard? Something you've done, maybe. Something innovative around re-engaging. Have you heard of any other innovative ideas, Lane? And I say innovative, it's not great. I mean, somebody else has done this. It's not. Yeah. Any other ideas you have around that?
Yeah. There's so many ideas, and I think one of the things again is the best ideas I've always heard is the ones that are intentioned, the ones that, have a certain focus. And I'll make this real quick. I was telling Jennifer about this before our call, where we had a Pauhana last night for our club, and we were trying to get their spouses to join our club, and we're trying to do a whiskey fellowship. So I said, hey, the spouses that like whiskey and all of that stuff, can you bring them to the Pauhana, and then I'll talk with them. And then when I did talk with three of these spouses, they're like, oh, wow, well, that would get us to join Rotary. Why don't you tell me Rotary had this? We want to join Rotary now. And it's just all about, that intention focus of, all right, getting the people that are interested in that same space together. And then, actually one of them actually went to a project this morning because of that. And I thought that's great,
Yeah, I think a fun model, and this is kind of just what you're talking about, Lane, is I would call it an affinity and a passion, a service focus club. So let's say you create a club that says, we are passionate about whiskey tasting. That's our shared affinity. And then maybe we're going to have a singular service focus. So I'll give you another example. I was talking to a group of women that really wanted to focus on wellness. And when I say the word wellness, it is, all things financial, health, mental, right? All the things that attribute to wellness. So they have a shared affinity around that. And so that every time they meet, there's going to be the subject matter is around wellness, and they're having fun and fellowship in that area. And then they are, their service focus is on mental wellness. So any service they do is in that area. So it's very focused. When I talked before about that value proposition, our unique selling proposition, that club knows who they are. That's what they're focused on. And so, I think when we asked about how do we get them engaged, right? So in summary, right, we have to create a place where they want to be. We want to ask for their help. I think, those tried and true principles, the things that we know, we have to say to people, this sounds really amazing. I love this idea too. What part of this do you think you could help me with? And ask for their help, right? Let them be the hero. And then create an infrastructure where we can get these things done in a way that's not too onerous for people, because we just have to meet people where they're at right now. And so I don't have the silver bullet or the magic pill, but those are just some timeless principles that I believe to be true. And that we have to continue to work on evolution in our clubs and creating an environment that we want to be in, and so do they. Does that make sense? Yeah. So we're at time, Lane.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. And I don't know if you have a slide that has your information or how people can contact you or anything like that.
You know, I did not include that because I generally look to you. You are the membership expert in your district.
Contact me. Contact me.
Lane, yeah.
Contact me.
Lane knows everything, and I'm here to help
Yes.
Lane too. You can of
With
course reach out to me, but I did not include that slide. I usually look to our district membership chair as that. Yeah, you're an expert. Well, Lane's one of my favorites, but don't tell the others.
Well, thank you so much, Jennifer. Thank
Yeah.
you. Stay great and warm, and
Yeah.
stay great in Idaho. And thanks for joining us in sunny Hawaii.
Yeah. Thanks for letting me come and hang out. Have a great rest of your day, guys.
You take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.